All right, guys, I'm glad to be back today. Welcome to Opinionated Collective. It looks like it's only going to be Justin and me today, since this is a topic that, we both felt was very important to discuss. And our normal group, they didn't really understand this particular topic the way me and Justin do. So me and Justin decided to take it today. So today, for Opinionated Collective, what we're going to be discussing is scams and how it affects people. There's an autistic theme to this, since, by the way, on little note, autism is affected by scamming just in the regular way, but I believe the statistics are higher, versus a neurotype. And Justin will also be sharing some, of his own experiences with this. We're also going to be discussing fraud. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm going to define what fraud is and examples of it. Justin is going to take scamming. Okay? How do you feel? Are you okay with that?
Yes, man.
All right. So basically, here's what both are very big deals right now. About 20 years ago, both of them were lesser known because they didn't get as advanced until the internet started getting much more prevalent and updated, but probably between the 2000s and today. In the older days, fraud took on many different things. When most of us think about fraud, and I'll define some examples of it. Most people usually thought of the early 2000s with that movie with Melissa McCarthy, and the first one that always comes to mind is credit card fraud. So everybody understands. And give me 1 second to pull this up. Sorry for the typing. Okay, credit card fraud is effectively defined as when somebody else basically takes a credit or a debit card and starts charging to it. Basically they want to buy things, for example, food or larger ticket items. I remember a movie back in the 2000s done by Melissa McCarthy, and it was exactly about this topic. So just so everyone, again, is aware, the definition of fraud is wrongful criminal deception intend to result in financial or personal gain. Now, perfect examples of fraud. The first one I just mentioned, identity fraud. There's also consumer fraud where, basically a group of people or an individual, tries to take something for personal or financial gain from the public. Credit and debit are the most obvious ones because this happens daily. There's mortgage fraud, which is basically signing up for a mortgage in somebody else's name. And last but not least, these two types of fraud, lottery fraud, prize fraud, fake charities, and what I call DIRR robocalls, deceptive interest rate reduction calls. Justin, why don't you take over and define what scamming is?
Yes, so scamming actually comes from fraud. And a definition of what a scam is, as I pull this up, is pretty similar. And it's actually, as a noun, a dishonest scheme, a fraud. It can be used as a verb to swindle, which is an example is a guy that scams the elderly out of their savings. So scam and scamming always is rooted in fraud. And so because of this, people like to use scamming, fraud interchangeably. And to an extent, they are. However, scamming is not just the act, but it is more to trick you into doing something that you think should be done in your own best interest, when in fact it's actually in someone else's best interest.
And in fact, the funniest thing that when you've defined that, as I'm just looking this up right now, here are the 10 largest countries where fraud is most prevalent. And guess which one shows up at the top?
Let me guess.
Who do you think it is?
I know for one thing, the United States is at the top of the list.
Actually, interestingly enough, internationally, it's Nigeria. Nigeria comes up first, India second, China third, Brazil fourth, Pakistan fifth, Indonesia sixth, Venezuela, South Africa, Philippines, Romania. But I could also definitely put, Nigeria is the most common one. And in fact, to play off of that, as you just said, here are some good examples of scams that have happened, that especially root from Nigeria. There were, if I remember correctly, advanced fee scam is a very popular one there. Phishing is almost always recognized, but the one that country is usually very well known for, unfortunately, was first the Western Union scam. I forgot what the statistics are on that, but I've had some personal experience with that, and that's number one. Tech support, unfortunately, that one's tied to India. And just from basic knowledge with tech support, as we've seen with all the channels like Scammer Payback, for sure, India definitely deserves to be on that list, unfortunately, and that's not a good thing.
No, it's not, Ben. And unfortunately, a lot of people from many countries, especially in the United States, get scammed by these people from India, because a lot of people who aren't as tech savvy aren't aware of the signs of the computer not being well. And so it's quite easy to trick people into fixing something that doesn't exist, when the person that you're tricking isn't even aware that there may not even be a problem to begin with.
Oh, of course not. And now to try to look at the psychology of this, from what we have both probably seen through education on some of these channels like Scammer Payback, why do you think scammers and fraudsters take in the first place? Do you think it's because their countries are poor? Do you think it's because they don't know better and they're trying to create a better life? Or do you think they're just being thieves because they can get away with it because we're on the internet?
Well, actually, I think it's all three. The fact that some of these countries are so poor, and the fact that the currency is worth not very much, it's pretty lucrative to ask for US dollars and then convert them into, say, Indian rupees or Romanian lei, or whatever the home currency is, because in their home country, having a lot of that currency doesn't mean very much. So if they can get US dollar, euro, Great British pounds, Canadian dollar, Swiss francs, New Zealand or Aussie dollar, those stronger currencies will fill those coffers of the scammers pretty nicely. And of course, they're humans too, so they're probably doing it to help their families and what they need to do. And also, yeah, they can probably get away with it, because who are we to, as the scammers put it, who are we to know what's right for us and the difference between what's good in tech or not good in tech? So unless you are sophisticated enough to know the signs of a scam and be very aware and diligent, it's very easy to fall prey to these scammers.
Nigeria,
and all the time, they're coming up with new and more ingenious ways to trick you.
oh, and actually, it's funny because where I know as somebody who's on the autistic spectrum got most affected, guess which country and which style of scam I was actually ironically affected by. The one or two people that I dealt with were from the country of Nigeria. I couldn't tell if they were man or woman, and guess where you end up meeting people like this. Ironically enough, and this is the bigger problem today, which is why the statistics got higher, but figure about this. In the US, 1 in 10 adults will fall victim to a scam or fraud every year. 1.3 million children have their identities stolen. You are most likely to be the victim of identity fraud by having your wallet snatched, than you are via online fraud. In 2018, internet-enabled fraud exploitation were responsible for basically a massive 2.7 billion in financial losses. In 2019, phishing attempts grew by 65%. 1 in 10 profiles, I'm going to go into this right now. One is free on dating sites is a scam. So basically, if you're on sites or apps like Plenty of Fish, you don't know who you're talking to. If you're on social media like Facebook, they'll approach you as potentially what they call a romance scammer. And I fell victim to this at least 1 or 2 times, largely because, I sort of saw the signs, but it's much trickier online.
And Ben, that is precisely how they get you. It's because it is online. It's harder
Yeah, you have no way of knowing if the
decipher,
person is telling the truth.
one, if that person is actually that person, and two, even if it is that person, what are their true intentions? Because we have things like ghosting and flirting online and all those crazy things that have been conjured up in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years.
The
And
last
so,
decade is where I think this finally just got thrown out into the open a lot more.
well, absolutely, because everybody's online now. And people think, well, Facebook verifies your identity. And yes, they do, but it's very hard to make it bulletproof. In fact, even LinkedIn, I was impersonated by a recruiter who's trying to get me a job. And I found out through a double booking of a potential employer. So
speaking of
it's
LinkedIn,
very easy
do you
to
know
do.
how many, in the first 2 years when I started using it a little more in 2020, it's actually funny as we're talking about this, most of the people that came up to me eventually, I've learned later on after some personal experience, were actually spammers, basically. The idiots who are coming up to you trying to get you to invest in something that you don't want to, and they would try to be tricky about it too. But you could tell on a more professional platform where I'm like, dude, this is not Instagram. And even on a site like this, I'm here for business. I know what you are. I know you're trying to get me to invest in Bitcoin. And now, unfortunately, cryptocurrencies is the most popular way for these people to be literally defrauding currency.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's funny, in these scams, which you're always warned about, when they, especially as the romancers, they ask you, they want you to send money and they want you to do it in a few ways. Last decade, before cryptocurrency got popular, it was Western Union. Then it would, then it goes to the advance fee. Then they wanted to do bank, wires, which, by the way, once you send that stuff, you're warned ahead of time through all those third-party services. One person I particularly dealt with put me through Western Union, RIA, and what's the other big popular one?
MoneyGram?
MoneyGram. Kicked off all three. Think like the channel, think Bend Over from one of the scammer channels where he specifically focuses on Nigeria. Pleasant Green. if you've ever watched his channel, and he presents this topic really well in a funny way. Everyone he deals with is literally from West Africa. And in many ways, by just watching that channel, you can get a great education on most of these people's circumstances in their countries. You are right, some of it is they're needing to help their families, but they're doing it in the wrong way.
Absolutely. And this all comes from desperation. These people from poor countries in the world, they're
But in
desperate.
those countries, as I've gotten to know a few people from Nigeria, the big problem is it's the people who are getting famous in their country are, like Nigeria, for example. Davido is a musician who's making who's making quite a fortune in the United States. They have many soccer players who go to Europe. Now, while that's a good message to be sending to those people, scammers and fraudsters coming from that country need to realize those people have special talents that got them paid.
Right.
The Nigerians who are coming from middle class backgrounds and upper class backgrounds have legitimately good, workable skill sets that are now getting them compensated in countries like the United Kingdom, all across Europe, and where they're mainly coming here to the United States of America. We know quite a few people from Nigeria, and we know they came over here as engineers. They're tradesmen, bankers,
all walks, all professions.
But they're coming over here and they're getting paid for legitimate, very good careers, for legitimate, very good careers, and they're doing it the right way.
They earned the right to make that living. And unfortunately, there's a subset of those people who are still in those countries who think, well, I don't need anything special. I can cheat my way. And this all goes back to the idea of, as long as cheating pays, people are going to cheat. Or another way to think about it is, if the legitimate way is cost prohibitive, why not just cheat your way? So those are two perspectives that get thrown out into the world, and it's very simple. Either you're going to try and do it the right way, or you're going to try and find a shortcut.
Now, unfortunately, the one biggest thing with most of these scammers, especially between India, Nigeria, and they're even here in the United States, obviously, the one event that really caused them to make probably more than they'll ever be able to do anything with. Literally, they all started making more money during COVID-19 with, oh my God, how many different things could you probably think of that they were doing? They were stealing benefits, from literally every state. I forgot how high the statistics were that I saw, but it was pretty cringe. They were stealing from, they were defrauding California. I don't know how California isn't even looking into this.
Well, all I can say is I'm not surprised. I mean, if there's always a way to go around a system, no system is foolproof.
No,
and that is unfortunate. Yet that is why we have teams of people that look at these things and try to resolve those loopholes and those workarounds.
Well, yes, you have every federal and state attorney general's office that at least does their diligence to try to look into this, although they can't really stop it. That's the other
true.
thing.
They can't stop it.
And the other thing is, when you have our government, unfortunately, which I know the biggest problem right now is, how do you regulate cryptocurrencies?
Oh, that's a big one.
Because unfortunately, if you start regulating cryptocurrencies, there's going to be a segment of people who are going to start whining about it, because the entire fascination with it in our generation is, oh, but it's not monitored by the government. In fact, I'm going to look something up real quick, because there was someone, For our audience today, by the way, whether you are LBGT, whether you are neurotype, whether you are autistic, I just saw this about 1 day ago. New York Post reported Peter Thiel was slamming Warren Buffett and Jamie Dimon for being skeptical of Bitcoin. Clearly, he was talking to two younger generations, and this is sort of remotely understandable. But where I'm with Buffett on this is cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin are meant to be an investment, not a tool for defrauding currencies. But unfortunately, this is why it's liked, and this is why it gets used that way.
Yeah, and that is the nature of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I mean, it's agnostic. Whether you treat it as money or as property, it does not matter. The fact that it exists means there's all kinds of issues surrounding it. So the same two people can use it for totally different purposes. And if you regulate it, then somebody is going to lose. And you know how people are. People hate to lose.
Which is understandable, but with something like this, especially, I think, unfortunately, there does need to be some level of a call for regulation. I'm going to be the unpopular one and say it. I think this fits as an investment class, but I don't like that it's being used as a tool for basically defrauding the entire global economic system. I don't think the economic system is perfect, but for basically scammers and fraudsters to go, around stealing money, stealing currencies from private individuals, from governments, and, utilizing Bitcoin as the mechanism just for their own personal issues, that's just wrong.
Absolutely, Ben, that is wrong. And I agree with you. I think some regulation is needed. Especially now, because it's unclear as to how crypto is supposed to be treated. So I'm right there with you. However, what was the original purpose of crypto?
The original purpose was it was going to be an investment class, which is what it was really, really originally supposed to be. Or actually, let me just do one very quick search for it. Decentralized digital currency was Bitcoin originally used for. Really, it was what it says right here on Google, just a quick search to this for the audience today, especially. Originally, it was supposed to be used in the form of a payment system or a P2P pay system, like, transferring money. So I guess that was one original use for it, but it is an investment class as well.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
What it's getting used for, unfortunately, is where really the problem lies today, and it should not be utilized by scammers and fraudsters.
True, but my question is, how do you prevent them from doing so?
And my question would be: is how do you prevent people from? I mean, I can think of a few things, and unfortunately, most people aren't going to be aware of it, but we should be mindful of how many sites we're registering for on the internet and whether the site or the app is safe or not, and we'll store our information in a way. And I'll give you one example. When I had to go send a letter today at FedEx actually mentioned to me, we don't save your information. So most businesses aren't probably going to do that. Most businesses try to save your information without thinking about it. But, that's one way of trying to protect information.
Okay, so protection of information. Yeah.
So an individual can definitely protect their information.
Yeah,
the thing that I wanted to finish our episode with today, and I don't think we got off topic. What do you think?
No, I don't think so. But there is one thing that I want to say is about the Zelle scam. Yeah. That's the biggest, hottest one right now. Yes, there's crypto. Yes, there's identity. But in this day and age, right now, as we're speaking, Zelle. And
over Cash App, Venmo.
over any of the other ones. I mean, the others, yes, there's fraud there too. But what makes Zelle special is the fact that if you ever get hooked into the Canadian banking system, they actually in Canada have this thing called Interact, and it is a bank-owned service where you're able to do peer-to-peer bank transactions straight from your bank account to another bank account, like a Venmo or a PayPal or a Cash App, but it's owned by the banks. What makes Zelle special is it's just like that, except it's owned by a private company, but is used heavily by the banks now. In fact, I remember one of my banks that I used didn't use Zelle, it used something else and later switched to Zelle. And in fact, I use Zelle myself, but only for trusted transactions. But here's the issue. What if, and this is what's going on right now, is what if someone can impersonate your bank and trick you into thinking something's wrong and have you do a Zelle transaction?
Well, then you can't get the money back.
Yeah, it's like a slow wire.
So I was trying to look for statistics on this, but it was a little difficult. So basically what I'm going to say is among fraud, especially when it comes to, individuals with disabilities, regardless of the spectrum, this is a little tricky to find statistics on, but in Alabama, 1 of 4 working adults is getting scammed, probably possibly even right now through, many means. It's not easy. It's not going to be very easy to find actual statistics on this, but definitely for most autistic adults, even like myself, the things I do right now are I have at least 1 or 2 people that I can bounce the ideas off, one of them being yourself as to if it's a scam or not. And then there's, after what happened with me with a few people, I finally got better education thanks to channels like Scammer Payback, name any of the scammer channels. I've probably seen them.
Yeah, and Ben, that's excellent of what you've done to self-educate yourself. And I highly recommend Scammer Payback.
That's actually one of my favorite
YouTube
He's actually one of my
channels.
favorite channels just for the tech support, but actually Pleasant Green, who covers Nigeria, he's also another terrific one because it's the way they both mix the humor when they do this.
Yeah, and it's funny, but serious at the same time. But
it's a serious subject, but the way it's presented is the most important thing. The way they present it is just besides the fact light and hysterical, they're getting the message across.
Correct.
One thing I want to say before we end our episode today, we're going to probably launch, me and Justin, guys, we're going to definitely probably do, some videos on this topic. And I think we may even launch a separate series on this, as well as a part 2. So I hope you guys learned something today from me and Justin on, on what a scam is and what a fraud, on what scamming and fraud are. And we'll see you at the next one.
And don't get scammed. Don't be subject to fraud and get educated.
Exactly.